South Africa's history didn't begin in 1994 when Mandela became president. It began decades earlier when millions of ordinary Nigerian students, civil servants, market women and workers were contributing what became known as the Mandela tax. Helping a country they had never seen because they believed freedom had no borders. I studied accounting. Back then, we were doing government tax. That's when I first became curious about Nigeria's role in the fight against apartheid. And honestly, it is well. And I promise you, this relationship didn't start when Maforisa featured Wizkid. It didn't. The story started decades before that. Nigeria gained independence in 1960, and almost immediately, our government adopted a foreign policy that said Africa's freedom was our responsibility too. South Africa wasn't our neighbor. We didn't share a border. Yet, Nigeria decided that apartheid was not just South Africa's problem. It was Africa's problem. By 1961, Nigeria had already begun supporting liberation movements like the African National Congress, the movement Nelson Mandela belonged to. Then came the 1970s under General Murtala Mohammed. Nigeria became one of the loudest voices against apartheid anywhere in the world. We weren't just making speeches, we were committing resources. Historical record shows that Nigeria was contributing millions of dollars every year to support the liberation struggle. Then something remarkable happened. In 1976, Nigeria launched what became popularly known as the South African Relief Fund, or what many Nigerians simply called Mandela tax. Imagine this: civil servants contributed, students contributed, workers contributed. Ordinary Nigerians gave what they had, not because South Africa belonged to them or belonged to us, but because they believed no African should live under racial oppression. Within just 6 months, the fund had raised $10.5 million back then, and that was almost like 50 years ago. Nigeria didn't stop there. The country imposed sanctions and oil restrictions against the apartheid regime. Even those decisions came at huge economic cost. Some historical estimates put Nigeria's total financial, diplomatic, economic support for South Africa's liberation over the years at around $61 billion. So think about it for 1 second. The payments, decades of sacrifices, money, diplomacy, scholarship, political pressure, support that stretched across generations, and no payment was made back. Then in 1990, after spending 27 years in prison, Nelson Mandela walked free. One of the countries he came to thank was Nigeria. He publicly acknowledged the role Nigerians played in supporting South Africa's freedom. Finally, in 1994, apartheid ended, and Nelson Mandela became South Africa's first democratic elected black president. Now, before anyone misunderstands me, this isn't about saying South Africa owes Nigeria forever. No country owes another country eternal gratitude. That's not the point. The point is this: history matters. Let me dash you this real quick. When we forget history, we begin to believe we have always been where we are today. Fight for your country, protect your economy, put your citizens first. Every nation has that right. We don't rewrite history, but don't forget that there was a time when millions of Nigerians, people who would never visit South Africa and would never benefit personally, still chose to stand for the freedom of people they had never met. Sometimes, the greatest investment a country makes in itself isn't in itself, but it is in humanity. I repeat that. The greatest investment a nation makes isn't in itself, but in humanity. And history has a funny way of reminding us who stood beside us when the world looked away. Have a great, beautiful day.